Welcome, everyone. We are the Midwest Mamas Raising the Bar for Special Needs. Together, we'll be producing episodes weekly to bring awareness for our special needs children and for families who want to learn more about life with special needs child. This is our first episode together, so I'd like to go ahead and introduce my beautiful friends to you. Up at the top, we have Miss Trista Heffner, author of Hurricane Heffners. We have BriAnna Olson, author of To Infinity and Beyond Words. And Lindsey Althaus, author of the Althaus Life blog. And for myself, I'm Annie Smith, author of Raising Different Disabilities. All of these blogs, they can all be found on Facebook and Instagram. So, I want to welcome all of you, and I wanted to basically create this specific platform on YouTube for our blogs so that the world of special needs could have a voice. I started my own blog around May of 2018, and originally it was not necessarily a blog. It was to let my family know, all in one group, for my son who had medical needs, and to let them all know how that was going. And since then, the whole entire page is completely changed and it has grown exponentially. So to introduce myself, like I said, I'm Annie Smith. My husband Logan and I live in Indiana. We have a 4-year-old daughter, Blakely, and twin sons who are 3, Jameson and Lucas. Both of our twin sons both have special needs. The journey, I say, started with Lucas, but it just doesn't end there. When I was pregnant with the boys, towards the end, I developed preeclampsia. For those who don't know what preeclampsia is, it's when you start having protein coming from into your urine, and you also have high blood pressure, and it can be fatal to the point of having seizures, and it can be fatal. So at 32 weeks, they noticed that I had high blood pressure, and I went into the hospital, and I stayed there for 2 weeks before I delivered the boys. Me and my husband Logan, basically, we lived there. And then at 35 weeks, prematurely, which is expected for a twin pregnancy, we delivered our boys C-section. Lucas, who was baby B, has started our family into special needs. He was born blue. He was not breathing. And then they were put into the NICU right after they were born. And he had feeding difficulties. And so they stayed there for a relatively short period of time, is about 2 weeks compared to a lot of other families. And he came home and he continued to have feeding problems. And we went to the pediatrician, and she sent us to pulmonology, which is a breathing doctor at our local children's hospital. He had a swallow study done, which is where you drink barium, and it shows on an x-ray going down through the throat, from the mouth of the throat down the airway, if a child is aspirating on liquids. And unfortunately, he aspirated on every single liquid that was given to him, and he that night was placed with a nasogastral tube, so a feeding tube that went from his nose all the way down to his belly. And they also diagnosed him with laryngomalacia, which is an airway disorder causing a stridor and a floppy airway. So he had that for about 3 months, and then we went on to a more permanent option of a G tube inside of his stomach, which is just a little button that we put his feeding tube extension into, and we feed him directly into his button. And that was when he was about 6 months old. He got that, and he still has it. And he then, because he was not developing like he was supposed to with his milestones, as in holding his head up, rolling over, sitting, all those kinds of things. He was diagnosed with global developmental delay, and that is when a child is not developing in more than 3 aspects of their life, usually gross motor, like sitting or walking, fine motor, which is anything that has to do with the hands, grabbing, pinching, and cognitive delays. So he has that. And then 7 months old, we went to a neurologist and he got diagnosed with cerebral palsy. He does have mild cerebral palsy, which means he is able to walk. He just has left-sided weakness. And he was mostly affected by speech and by swallowing. He was diagnosed with speech apraxia, which is a disconnect from the brain to the mouth. He knows what he wants to say. It just doesn't come out correctly. And then recently he was also diagnosed with early ADHD from his developmental pediatrician. So Lucas has medical complexities, and we pretty much always knew that there was stuff going on with him since birth. We kind of got blindsided with our son Jameson. He was actually baby A when he was born, and he was born healthy, and he developed ahead of schedule for everything. He never had a problem eating or walking or anything until he was 18 months old, and then he did a dramatic flip and he regressed. He stopped responding to his name. He stopped responding to sounds. He actually stopped looking at us, and he had a lot of chronic ear infections, so they thought that he had hearing loss because of that. So he went and got hearing tested done in the booth 4 times, and he failed. He had tubes put in his ears to try to open up the ears to see if that was causing his hearing loss, and that did not work. So we settled for a sedated ABR, which is when they take and put electrodes on the forehead, and that allows them to go in and see what he can truly hear and process from his ears to his brain. And turns out that he could hear everything perfectly. So we were pretty shocked at that. He then went on to a clinic here locally and got diagnosed with autism, and they diagnosed him with severe nonverbal autism. And then I decided quite a bit of time later, it was kind of hard for me to adjust to Jameson's diagnosis versus Lucas's, because like I said, we knew Lucas had complexities. Jameson's kind of caught me off guard, so it took a lot longer for me to accept. But recently, about 3 months ago, we decided to collaborate Lucas and Jameson's special needs together with our blog, Raising Different Disabilities. And that's really helped us navigate the special needs world with twins. I've had a lot of different people come to me in messages saying that they have twins. One has a special needs, the other one doesn't. And it's kind of a rarity to have one with special needs and then another one with special needs, because usually when they're premature and one's born early, you kind of pretty much know the signs to expect. And for Jameson, we just didn't expect it. So that is our journey, kind of in a nutshell. I introduced all of the girls earlier, but now they are going to pretty much dive in like I did into their lives, and they're going to show you their world. So, hey, Trista, I can't wait to hear about your journey.
Hey, thank you so much. My name is Trista, and my husband Drew and I live in Wisconsin. When we met, he already had a 4-year-old daughter that joined our journey together at that time. We then got married and later had our son David. The beginning of David's early first year and a half was pretty typical. He did not have any very obvious signs at the beginning of any sort of disability. His came a little bit later on when he was more expected to start crawling and walking. He was delayed, but we really were watching closely with the pediatrician. He just liked to keep us on our toes. Every time the pediatrician would give us a deadline, he would hit it right before she would say, hey, let's look into things a little bit further. So him having a disability was not as glaring as some other people's kids present. His was very subtle at the beginning, and like Annie mentioned, her son had regressed David too after he hit those milestones of crawling and walking late. He still hit them, and he did around 3 have quite a bit of a speech delay. So we did a birth to 3 program, and we made a little bit of progress. And once the school system got involved is when we really started to dive a little bit further into his developmental delays, as they had originally diagnosed him with just a speech delay. And as preschool got under the way, the school did a evaluation, and they developed or diagnosed him with educational autism, which was their way of being able to give him services within the school, because they felt that he needed more than speech, but he did not have a full-on medical diagnosis of autism at the time. He later then continued to show signs of the speech therapy not being the only thing that he needed to assist him to continue to develop. We then got into occupational therapy to try and work with things. And so, with him meeting all of those different milestones just late, and he does have quite an older sister, we thought that maybe he was just getting too much assistance, and therefore that's why it was just a little bit later. His signs weren't completely glaring until more around age 4 or 5, and that's when we went to have him diagnosed. Shortly after we had him diagnosed, around age 5, he then started ABA, and we were able to see quite a bit of growth through that. He now also has speech and occupational therapy through the school district. We do additional speech therapies through the private option as well. And shortly after his diagnosis, I was able to legally adopt my stepdaughter as well. So
That's
she's
awesome.
been, yeah, she was able to legally fully join the family, which was super exciting for us. We've had to go through quite a few battles with both of our kids in many very different ways, but nonetheless, they were both a fight. And unfortunately, David's fights have not ended like Elena's has, and we will continue to fight as long as we need to get him the services, give him the voice that he needs to develop and continue on. Um, we started our blog actually just a few months ago, as I have met more and more of the special needs community, and a lot of my friends have expressed and shared with me how therapeutic it is to share your journey, to help get your voice out there, to connect with other families that either have gone through what you have gone through or haven't and have used your page or your stories as a guide for things that they may be going through. And so that was the biggest reason that we started our page, is to share our voice, share our story, to raise awareness, because as we got farther and farther into our journey, we realized that there is not near enough awareness out there for the outside world that don't know what it's like having a child with autism, especially when it's not obvious when you're just looking at him that there is something additional needs that he has. So I have already found in the first few months of us starting our page that it's been a great help for me to share our journey and not only for friends, but family that haven't understood the diagnosis or don't know
Yeah.
what it entails.
Yep.
They're able to see, we don't have all of our family that lives close. So they're able to see our daily life through the journey, family and friends, and kind of see what we go through, how we help him. And they're able to also learn through those avenues that when they do see him, that they're able to better interact with him and connect with him and learn how to enter his world. And they really find value in being able to then know how to connect with him and get a response from him,
Yeah.
because a typical hi, how are you doesn't look the same with David as it does with Elena. So it's been a great journey so far, and I'm really blessed to have the friends and support that I do along the journey. And I'm grateful to be here with all of you, that we can use yet another platform to share our journeys and our voices and spread the awareness for all of the disabilities out there, no matter how they look.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I am BriAnna, and my husband and I actually live in Nebraska. We have a 5-year-old son named Beckett. Um, and Beckett's story looks a little bit different, as it started out that he was a micro preemie, which basically just means he was very, very small. He was born at just 24 weeks gestation.
Oh, wow.
So months and months early. Yeah. Um, I had developed something called HELP syndrome in his pregnancy. Which is essentially a further progression of preeclampsia, kind of an end stage, kind of high liver enzymes, low platelets, things like that, along with the high blood pressure and all that scary stuff. So we kind of got as far as we could, and we made it to just the 24 weeks. And then he had a 4-month long NICU stay, because you have to, then teach your child how to breathe on their own. You have to teach them how to eat on their own. I talk about a lot, how those are things that you're born knowing how to do that. And, our son had to learn. So, after during his NICU stay, they were very adamant about the fact that, when your child is born that early, the probability of them being developmentally delayed, is huge. They really push on watching out for that, and kind of documenting on your own when your child hits those milestones of sitting, walking, talking, all of those things. They really want to know if there was a delay, and if so, how severe. So they kind of start you right out of the gate with early intervention. From At least in Nebraska, they had them come to our home. I believe the first meeting was when he was only about 6 months old. And so, of course, there's not a whole lot of, you know, interaction on their part. They just kind of check with parents, and they say, hey, what are you seeing? What are you not seeing? How's it going? And at that point, of course, there wasn't much to tell, but they kind of follow you all the way up. They will go from the time that you go home successfully up to school age. And so Beckett met his milestones, but kind of he always met them late. It's kind of we waited around, but again, we were, made aware that the probability of that was really high just because of the prematurity. So we, for instance, he didn't walk until he was about 19 months old, and he had his first words, his first singular words, at about a year old, and then, as they do, they built, and he got to about 15 words like no, go, bye, mama, dada, things like that. Um, and then we slowly started seeing that kind of slip away. That was our big kind of first inkling that something more was going on than just developmental delay. we were first-time parents, but we thought, there has to be something more going on if he is no longer using any of his words, just none. We brought it to our pediatrician's attention. We again brought it to the early intervention group's attention, and we were actually met with some pushback with them kind of trying to reassure us that it was simply because he was so premature. So we kind of got that pushback there with trying to speak up for him and trying to look more into it and being met kind of with a wall. And then by the age of 4, we took him to a second pediatrician as the first had retired. And she kind of gathered us all up and she said, I'm really sorry that you have been met with such, force and kind of, she said, I'm not quite sure why they're not being so agreeable. And we didn't know autism. We didn't know anyone that had autism before. But they said, your child is most definitely autistic. He is on the severe end, as he was still nonverbal at that time of being 4. So we had then gone 2 whole years without hearing any more words. And it kind of spiraled from there. He is still nonverbal. We use an iPad to actually communicate at this point with different apps and things that allow him to choose words and pictures and things that he wants to say. He does go to public school in the mornings, and then he goes to an ABA center in the afternoon. So his days are kind of split half and half. That's just what works well for him. And as for myself, I have always kind of like Trista mentioned, that writing is very, very therapeutic for me. And so I kind of took it upon myself to put it out there. And I thought, even if no one else reads this, I can document from where my son came from to where he is on any given day in the future. I really wanted to have that at our disposal, especially for those hard days when we think, when you're in one of those hard spots, it's nice to be able to look back and say, this is how much he's grown, this is how much he's progressed, and this is what he's doing, and this is amazing. So I took it upon myself to start a blog, and I figured maybe if it can help one other mom or one other dad, or just a grandparent or something, again, what Trista had said about, interacting with grandparents and different family, if it can touch one of them and help my child communicate with them, if it can give them a better relationship, then I mean, that's a win for everyone. So I started my blog To Infinity and Beyond Words. And we've just kind of been trying to advocate as best we can with the knowledge that we have right now. And every day we're learning more and more about nonverbal autism. And, that's kind of where we are. We're at a good place, but, we have a long way to go because we all do. So I know that Miss Lindsey down there in the bottom has a similar story with NICU. So I will pass it on to her.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Bri. Yep. My name is Lindsey, and I live in a literal village in Ohio with my husband and our 2 crazy kids, Whitman and Genevieve. Whitman was born at 33 weeks at a hospital ill-equipped for him. My preeclampsia had gotten scary. He had to be delivered. I had already started the labor process because my body hates to be pregnant. It's just a fact.
Same.
And so one of the scariest moments in my life was when my husband, who is not a yeller, if you know him personally, he's a very chill guy, screamed that he wasn't going to cut the umbilical cord because Whitman wasn't breathing. He's like, I'm not cutting it. There's something wrong. I'm not. Nope, not cutting it. So he was transferred to a bigger hospital, and I had lost a lot of blood and stayed. They wouldn't discharge me. I tried. They just wouldn't. Obviously, they looked at me like I was crazy. But I got to meet Whitman officially for the first time when he was 3 days old. And to hold him for 45 seconds, maybe it was like 5 minutes, and he became too unstable to hold. So we basically sat and watched him in an incubator for a few days while he was on life support. And he was only like, it should have been a longer stay. Our pediatrician has told us that, but he was only there for 2 weeks, almost to the hour from the time he was born to when we were discharged. But we monitored him. We were at the doctor like every day. Sometimes I still feel like we're at the doctor every day with him. Anybody else feel like that? It always feels like we're at the doctor.
All the time.
But he like what Trista and Bri have said, he would hit his milestones fairly far behind. I would ask about it, but I'm a fairly laid back, I'm a high strung person, but I'm a laid back person. Like, it's the best of both worlds, if that makes sense. So I was just like, oh my gosh, he's not hitting milestones. But that's okay, he'll get there. And our pediatrician, I don't know if they did this with you, Bri, but they used gestational age instead of his actual age.
Yes.
So they'd be like, oh, don't worry. Technically, he's only blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, okay, good. Cool.
Yeah, I think they literally, I think, stopped that right at school age or something. So you have to like calculate it all the way up.
Yeah. I don't do math like that. Nope. That's why I married an engineer, guys. That's why I married an engineer.
Smart.
So, because I don't want to do math. Anyway, so yeah, he would hit him, but barely hit him. And we never had a regression. Like, everybody talks about this regression. And Whitman's first ever regression happened when he was 5. And it was because he was having seizures. So, like, we never, I'm sure that I probably would have been more diligent about, like, his delays if we would have had, like, this regression before our eyes. But he just never talked. Like, and my husband doesn't like to talk. Like, I know that you guys have seen him personally, and when he wants to say something but doesn't want to say something, he stares at you. Like, you gonna say it? You want me to say? So that was like, I just assumed that Whitman just had the personality of Jeremy. Like, because it was my understanding that Jeremy didn't talk until later. Not significantly later, but later for like kids. But yeah, so I was pregnant, or I just had Vivi, and we decided that we should probably get Whitman checked. He was 3.5, and I was pumping. It was awesome. It's a great day. Jeremy couldn't be at the appointment because he'd used everything from maternity leave and then some, because again, my body doesn't like to be pregnant. So I started going into labor with Vivi at 34 weeks. So I just sit my butt down and not be a parent. Went and lived with my brother and sister-in-law just so I wouldn't go into labor. But my brother came with me for the appointment, and we sat in this super tiny room, and the most perky speech therapist came in and played with Whit and watched him, and we got an apraxia diagnosis, and we took that, and I was this overly hormonal 2 weeks postpartum mom who was like, sweet, we have apraxia, we don't have autism. And then 3 months later, we went to a developmental pediatrician, and I was still that naive mom of cocky who was like, we got apraxia, we're good. And we got the autism diagnosis. So Whitman is going to be 7 in 1 week, and still doesn't talk, uses an iPad, uses facial expressions, pointing, and some vocals, but they're not words. The only words he has, which just shows how our life is, the one phrase that he will use is bad baby, which is referring to Vivi, his sister. He will point at her, roll his eyes, and go, "Bad baby." And I'm like, yep, I can't fight that. Can't deny that at all. Yeah. And then he will say bye-bye and go. But those are his only consistents. So yeah, that's our story in a quick nutshell. So we never live the same day twice. I don't know if you guys feel like that. Like, it's never ever the same day. And just when you think
that's for sure.
Just when you think you have all their quirks figured out, they throw in a new one, and you're just like, oh.
Why did you start your blog?
Oh, I forgot about that. I started it. I've always liked to write. Like writing's my thing.
Mhm.
And I had some extra time during COVID. And I was like, hey,
Hey.
why not start a blog? Jeremy did this thing in COVID. We were stuck together, and I'm a chatty Cathy, and he is not. And he was finally like, you know what? Maybe in COVID we should be better, not bitter. Because
I
I
like that.
was a little
Oh, that is
feisty.
awesome.
I like that
And
though.
I said, okay. And he's like, why don't we try and do things that we wouldn't have had time to do? And I was like, sweet. It's like, I'm going to start a blog and you're going to build it. And he just kind of looked at me for a second and like gave me the look like I walked into that. And he's like, bye. So he built me a blog.
I love that. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we actually say that. I sent him, it's this
Cool.
Chris Traeger meme or GIF from Parks and Rec, and it says that. So, like, if one of us does something, one of us will send the teamwork makes the dream work GIF.
I think that's
So,
a beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to use your time to advocate for your
Yeah.
kid, though. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we thought
That's awesome.
that it would be a fun, good idea. So people knew what we were going through. People knew what we were feeling. So, because we try and be as cool as humanly possible at like family events and things like, hey, we got it together when we really don't. And
Fake it till you make it. That's our motto around here.
that's ours too. Or we just smile through it. We just smile. Yeah.
Everything's great.
Everything's perfect. We're awesome.
You just say, we're blessed.
Blessed
That's
we
a
are
good one. I
indeed.
can do that one.
Indeed.
We're blessed.
We are. We're all blessed. But
Absolutely.
but yeah, Annie, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, well, that was awesome, guys. That's it for this week. Thank you so much, and make sure you go ahead and on YouTube hit the subscribe button. That way you can be notified every time that we upload each week. And also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and just search in our blog names. So we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye.
Bye.